Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Fatini Amira binti Saad.
And I'm Shazina Cho binti Abdul Razak.
The project that we will be doing is a sport equipment management system. This system will have the management of sport equipment borrowing. It will be used by UTEM students and the storekeeper. The system will replace the manual process where students fill up a form at the sport complex for them to learn the equipment. This manual process takes time to process and difficult where students don't know when the equipment will be available for lending or when their application is approved or even rejected. The storekeeper also had difficulty in managing the equipment inventory as it is all recorded in documents. This equipment management system will provide a paperless process where students can view their application status anywhere and anytime by accessing the system. The storekeeper also can keep the equipment information systematically within the system.
The architectural design for sport equipment management system, we use a structural model to design its architectural model. The components that are involved in this system is login. For user to run the system, create application used for student to make the application before borrowing the equipment. Manage application for storekeeper to approve or reject the application made by student. The equipment registration for storekeeper to add new equipment details. The data is passive while the component of the data store is active for the system to be able to control the logic flow. All components will check the data store if there are any changes made. User need to send a request to the system to be able to perform action. For example, in the create an application component, user need to insert the detail of the application and the system will do the computational process independently. All components use the same shared data that is held in the repository that can be accessed by all subsystems. For the decomposition description, there are a few diagrams in this topic, such as activity diagram, sequence diagram, and components diagram. I will explain about our activity diagram. Sport equipment management system start with a login interface where the user need to log in their account using staff ID if they are staff or storekeeper, or student matric number if they are student, with their own password. The system will verify the user ID whether the user existed or not. If user does not exist, the system will show a login error message. If the system can verify, it will distinguish whether the user is a student or staff. Then, will redirect them to their respective page. If the user is a storekeeper, then the menu interface for the storekeeper will be shown. The item that will be shown in the menu is the list of equipment and the application list. By clicking the View Equipment List button, the storekeeper can manage the equipment details. They can add new items, update the quantity of the new arrival equipment, or dispose of equipment if the equipment are broken or other reason. If the user is a student, then the menu interface for the student will be shown. The items that are shown in the menu is the available equipment list for student to check whether the equipment they want is available or not before making the request. They also can view their application request status by clicking the View Application Status on the menu list.
Now, I will explain on the sequence diagram. Sequence diagram will show how the object and class in the system interact with each other. As the user accesses the system, the login UI boundary will ask the user to input their ID and password into the text field that is shown in the interface. Then the login controller will get the information and validate the user with the user entity. Then it will return result. If the return result is true, then the controller will then check if the user is a storekeeper or a student. If the user is a storekeeper, then it will come upon the equipment form UI boundary. In this boundary, the system will display a form for the user to be able to add a new equipment details or even update the existing details. The boundary will send the inserted data into the controller, which is manage equipment controller. Then it will call the add new equipment function from the equipment entity for the data to be inserted into the database. Then the controller will show the result, either the process is successful or fail to the equipment form UI boundary. Then the user also can go to the list of application UI boundary to view the application list. In this boundary, the user can either accept or reject the application to update the status. When the user click the button accept or reject, the result will be sent into the manage application controller, and the controller will call set status function from the borrow equipment entity. Then it will display the updated status into the list of application UI boundary. Then if the user is a student, the student will be redirected to the request application UI boundary, where user will fill in the application form to borrow the equipment. Then the boundary will send the inserted information into the controller. Then the controller will call set application details from the entity and show the result of insertion into the display. The user then can view their application. Next, I will explain on the component diagram. This diagram will show the dependency of each component in this system with each other. There are three interface components which is manage application, list of application, and application form. All these interface or boundary will depend on the GUI widget, which will be coded using CSS and JavaScript. And each boundary depends on one controller. The manage application boundary will depend on the manage equipment controller to communicate with the entity. The list of application will depend on the manage application to communicate with the entity, and application form depends on the request equipment to communicate with the entities. All the interface and the boundary will has a full dependency with the controller to be able to communicate with the entities to insert, update, or delete data of the system. Now I will explain on the class diagram of the sport equipment management system. In this class diagram, it will show all the objects and classes in this system, including all the methods and attributes. There are three components in the entity, 3 components in controller, and 3 components in the boundaries. In the entity, there's equipment class, user class, and borrow equipment. The equipment class will concern on the details of the equipment, the details of the sport equipment. The user will be concerned on the details of the login user of the system. It is used to keep the current login user in that session. The borrow equipment class will concern on the borrowing details, such as the matrix number of the student who is borrowing the equipment, the staff number, which is the storekeeper ID, to know who's the person responsible for managing the application, the equipment ID, the equipment ID to know which equipment did the student borrow, and the quantity, and the borrow dates, also the return dates of the equipment. The entity also have a status attribute that will keep the details on whether the application to borrow the equipment is accepted or declined or rejected. The controller component will manage the interaction between boundaries and entity. You have the set and get method for the boundary to access the data from entity. Request equipment class and manage application class can access the borrow equipment entity, while equipment entity can only be accessed by the manage equipment class. Each boundary in the system will depend on one controller each. Application form can access the entity through request equipment. List of application can access entity through the manage application, and manage equipment form can access the entity through equipment controller.